our first speaker is Marcos Rivera. He's coming to us from Voces de la Frontera. Among several other hats, Marcos Rivera is the lead workshop facilitator for the Idea Works, a communications company dedicated to bringing community engagement to the corporate practice of marketing. He started helping people integrate into tribes as a house fellow in the UW-Madison dormitories while he pursued his degree in engineering. He then built upon those experiences in the U.S. Navy as a command-level equal opportunity officer while performing his duties as a helicopter pilot, positions for which the Navy trained him extensively. These experiences served Rivera well at the Thunderbird School of Global Management, where he graduated with a master's in international management along with people from 56 other countries. In addition to having managed diverse teams throughout the U.S. and Latin America, Rivera led the MBA program in one of Bolivia's top business schools, teaching classes on entrepreneurship and cross-cultural communications, among others. Rivera is a member of Voces de la Frontera Sheboygan, a community-based immigrant and workers' rights advocacy group. And today he's going to be presenting on the intersection of civil rights and immigration in 2018. So let's welcome our speaker.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Buenas noches. Oh, come on, we can, grab a little bit more energy. Buenas noches. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Well, thank you for having me. As Bill said, my name is Marcos Guevara. My pronouns are he, him, his. Thank you for coming. I know there are a myriad of things that one can do on a Tuesday evening in a beautiful fall season like we're having. And being here listening to me is an honor. Also, thank you to the university for inviting me, and thanks to Dr. Strobel and DiRienzo for carving out a little space for me in my soapbox. I'm here to talk about civil rights tonight, immigration, and what we can do about it in 2018. But to be honest, my focus is going to be more about what we can do about it. I'll gloss over some of the important highlights, but I wanna get to the doing and leave you for homework, since we're at the university, some of the studying about doing. I'm also supposed to warn you that I say inappropriate things at awkward moments. That's my hobby. As Bill mentioned, I got invited to speak here because the word got out that I am part of Voces de la Frontera, which is, as you guys heard, it's a grassroots statewide organization in Wisconsin that advocates for immigrant, refugee, and low-wage worker rights. Well, I guess my experience as a Latin American immigrant is also germane. I grew up in Mexico City. My father is from the southern state of Oaxaca, and if you want to see a real live Oaxacan, he's sitting right over there. And my mother's from Green Bay. So if you want to see somebody who's really, really from Green Bay, she's sitting right next to the Oaxacan. And my wife is from Bolivia. So we've got the entire continent. And I'm a little bit French-Canadian through my mother, so we go all the way, right? But now you know what my link is to Wisconsin. I did high school in Milwaukee, Brown Deer to be precise. And as Bill mentioned, my undergraduate's from UW-Madison. Before I joined the U.S. Navy. I was going to become an astronaut, which is why I went to flight school. But then the Navy decided I was going to be a helicopter pilot, so there went the astronaut thing. I did my MBA in Arizona, and then I lived in Bolivia for 9 years. We've been back in the U.S. here in Sheboygan specifically since 2008. This is the longest place I've lived ever. So let me get a real quick feel for who's here. I want to know if there are anyone here who's connected to childhood athletics. Coaches, parents of players. Show of hands. Who's played sports as a child? Okay. So when you were kids, because I know it's been a while, did you have rules for when in a game the team that started to really, really score highly was somehow held back? Or, to say it differently, the team that was falling really, really behind got some advantages? Did that ever happen? Are you guys familiar with the practice of either handicapping a hyper-talented team or adding benefit to the... Okay, good. So everybody knows what I'm talking about. In football, in soccer, we call it, it's part of the whole fair play movement, right? But I'm sure it's manifested in other sports where they add more players, or they reduce the goal size, or every score counts for 2, just to try and make it more even and not demoralize the kids, right? Who here has gotten an extension on a work or school assignment? And the rest of you are lying about it. Okay, cool. I'll keep the secret. How many of you have been stopped by the police and gotten off with just a warning? All right. Okay, so related to all this, here's a quick story. Right here in Sheboygan County, the district attorney, Joel Urmansky, in his last annual report, mentioned of this check diversion program that was given life in a 2003 county ordinance, where people adhering to this program who have written a fundless check, the rubber ones that bounce, can avoid criminal charges, usually fraud, and the attendant consequences of a conviction, like loss of freedom, asset forfeiture, loss of status, and loss of the ability to overcome the mistake of adding and subtracting and keeping track of checkbook. And over the years, since 2003, many people have avoided going to jail for writing checks without funds. So I want you guys to think about the questions I just asked and how you feel about it. But I don't need an answer yet. Just file it away in a folder we're going to call privilege, okay? A mental folder called privilege. I also want to go through some ground rules tonight, because I do say inappropriate things at awkward moments. We're going to give each other the benefit of the doubt. When I voice an opinion or you ask a question or voice an opinion, we're not here to roast anybody. Specifically, we're not here to roast me, please. But we're also not going to tolerate rude or insensitive behavior. We're not here to toss firebombs at each other either. We're here to engage in civil discourse. Facts are facts. They're verifiable. They're true. I'm part of a campaign. It's an informal campaign, but I'm part of a campaign to fight the epistemic crisis that we're living in right now. As I'm sure all of you know, epistemology is the branch of philosophy that talks about how we know things and what it means for something to be true or false, accurate or inaccurate. I think right now, and a lot of people agree, that there is an epistemic breach. Speaking of which, on the spectrum of falsehoods, I like to quote Benjamin Disraeli. There are lies, there are damn lies, and then all the way on the end of falsehoods, there's statistics. It's complicated. Nobody has any silver bullets. There aren't any answers that fit neatly in a tweet or a meme. It's taken us decades, in some cases centuries, to get where we are. And it'll take just as long to fix it once we decide to stop breaking it. I may use a term or an acronym that you don't recognize. If you have a doubt, odds are somebody else has a doubt. Just raise your hand, I'll go, "Ooh, you guys don't know what ABC means," and I'll define it with ease. As the speaker tonight, and largely benevolent dictator, I get to set more rules as I see fit. Cool? Great. Before I start one of these conversations, I like to talk about some of the cognitive biases that we bring to these conversations. My favorite one is attribution error. We like to project ourselves onto the things we observe, right? So for people in my parents' generation, when they see somebody with a mohawk and blue hair and a lot of piercings and tattoos, they go, whoa, that person is really out there, right? And what cognitive scientists will tell you, it's because what they're doing is they're looking at that person thinking, where would I have to be? What kind of mind space would I have to occupy to look like that right now? And given their life experience, they'd have to be stoned out of their mind, right? To be doing what they're observing. But that's attribution error, right? Just because for me to have a certain haircut or wear a certain thing or walk a certain way would take some really extreme intervention doesn't mean that extreme intervention happened to the person I'm observing, okay? So you'll hear me potentially talk about how we're projecting ourselves, how we're centering me on my observations. Think hoodies, drooped pants, tats, that kind of stuff, piercings. The next one is confirmation bias. I like to call the Rorschach effect. Two people observe one thing, one event, one speech, one word, one piece of art, and they come up with totally different conclusions that tend to support their worldview. It's confirmation bias. That's what it's called, confirmation bias. I saw this happen. My worldview is this. This thing supports my worldview. Boom, we're there. I like to illustrate this bias with the story of the two fish that are swimming downstream, and they come across a fish that's swimming upstream, and this fish that's swimming upstream says, "How's the current today, guys?" And the two swimming downstream said, "What current?" The third source of bias is cognitive dissonance. When I am caught in an error or mistake, or I'm confronted with something, I can double down and say, no, I was lied to, or I can admit, I may have made a mistake. The brain is wired to say, nope, you've been led down the rosy path, it's not your fault, you're okay. Okay? So cognitive dissonance is how we resolve the either I'm an idiot or somebody else is at fault, right? And we tend to blame somebody else. No, I don't make mistakes, I'm infallible. The fourth thing I like to bring into this is tribalism, is how we like to talk about us and them with relative ease, where it's framed in a zero-sum game, right? Whatever they have, we don't have, okay? And that's also a fallacy that we need to watch out for. Fortunately, at the university, I'm not afraid of talking about anti-intellectualism. I think we can all admit that in the prevailing culture, a certain disdain for things professorial and academic. Not here, I'm sure. And specifically within the prevailing anti-intellectualism that we're seeing today, in today's culture, is an ease in making generalizations from empirical evidence, questioning, as I mentioned before, what is true and what is false, and discerning what is propaganda or marketing spin from what is true and truth. We also allow ourselves to be taken by emotional arguments and have trouble coming back to a facts-based, dispassionate analysis of the matter. And then we are also easily divorced from the historical context within which events happen. Generally, we're lazy in doing research and checking out what other people are saying is factual or not. And our educational system has glossed over a whole bunch of stuff. As you start scratching at some of the issues we're facing, you notice that there's a bunch of things that our high school's social studies teacher didn't talk about. And that is not so great. And then the sixth issue that's related to cognitive dissonance is fragility. So let's go through this. I'm going to talk about it through an analogy. All right? Imagine there's 13 kids. 10 of them wear white t-shirts, 3 of them brown tees. Okay? Every day the white tee kids get to leave class early to attend lunch ahead of everyone else. The brown tee kids follow afterwards. Unfortunately, like clockwork, the 3 brown tee kids are bullied by 6 of the white tee kids. This is sounding like one of those story problems in your math classes, right? Okay. So if they both go to Cleveland and arrive at, no. So they are bullied by 6 of the 10 white kids waiting for them to steal their lunch money. So naturally, the brown tee kids are upset and alert the teacher by saying, hey, those white tee kids keep stealing our lunch money every day. It's horrible. Help us. Now the 4 other white tee kids who aren't bullies, in fact, they dislike the bullies. They look at the bullies and say, oh, that's horrible, you shouldn't do that. They hear the complaint, but what they say is, hey, wait a second. Not all the white tee kids are doing that. All right? It's not us. Right? And the pattern continues. The 6 white tee kids harass the 3 brown tee kids, and the 4 white tee kids don't say, hey, not all white t-shirt kids do that. Right? Several of you have reached the conclusion that, wait, it doesn't make any sense. Of course, these 4 white tee kids aren't part of the problem because they're not stealing lunches. But the 6 bullies are going to keep stealing lunch money until someone intervenes, right? So when we talk about fragility, I like to, and you'll hear people say, wait, not all white people, or not all men, or not all rich people, right? We missed the point, right? Essentially, by repeating the not all whatever, you're attempting to devoid the group you're speaking of responsibility in fixing the matter. The brown tee kids already know that it's not all the white tee kids. They know it's the 6 white tee kids, not the 4 white tee kids. So there is no need to say not all white t-shirt kids do this. But what can be done about this? Well, it's clear to us sitting in this room that the 4 white tee kids need to stand next to the 3 brown tee kids and in between the 7 of them, talk to the 6 white tee kids and say, dude, not cool, right? 6 on 7, better odds. It's likely that we can defeat the bullies together, right? So you guys got that analogy, right? I don't have to beat that horse anymore. All right. So we're starting to make it through the introduction. In the next 2 hours, I will talk to you about. So I want to jump into some real quick things I know about immigration here in Sheboygan County, because I want to bring it to where we live. Rather than talk about these horrible things that may or may not be happening, talk about the epistemic breach, far, far away that we have no way of corroborating with our own lived experience. So, here's what I know. Families in Sheboygan County are being separated every day. There is here's one of those acronyms, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, paddy wagon and agents come to the Sheboygan County Jail on Tuesdays and Thursdays to remove people whose immigration status is questioned. All right? By and large, the people that are being removed have been here 10, 20, 30 years. They came here when it wasn't such a big deal. It still isn't a crime, by the way, not even today. They're running from harsh living conditions, some of them even death. Conditions, by the way, that are often linked to U.S. policy and intervention in the places where they're from. And they're looking for a shot at the American dream, the great, good old American dream. Everybody wants a shot at the American dream. Just like my children did. I mean, my children. I'm not talking allegorically about anybody else. It's my children are immigrants. I'm an immigrant. My wife's an immigrant. My parents are immigrants. But also my French, Irish, and German ancestors. They came here looking for a shot at the American dream. And if you think about it, even the Pilgrims were undocumented immigrants. These people here in Sheboygan County are often picked up by a system because, in an effort to provide for their families, get caught with a busted taillight or driving without a driver's license or on an expired driver's license. And up until 2015, you could get a driver's license regardless of your legal status. Because at that time, up until that time, we thought it was more important to have safe, accountable drivers than undocumented drivers on the roads. So I ask you guys, what kind of outcomes are we seeking with the policy of denying driver's licensing to people based on their immigration status? And hold that thought. So, every demographic has bad apples, right? But it doesn't make any sense. The reasonable conclusion isn't to dump the entire apple cart into Lake Michigan. We have to work into the apple cart and find the bad apples, right? And a lot of people like to say, but law and order. And a few moments ago, if you recall, I asked you guys to put into the privilege folder some situations where authorities had leniency that's built into the system for latitude, prosecutorial latitude, to do good by the community, to exercise some good judgment, to be humane, right? So I ask you, when you or someone you know is a beneficiary of this prosecutorial latitude, do you go, oh no, I was 10 miles over the speed limit, I want my ticket. Don't be talking about no warning, right? And perhaps maybe hitting too close to home, even the University of Wisconsin system is changing scholarship awards, scholarships that have been awarded to merit-based high school students when they find out about their document status. And I'm speaking specifically of people in the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the DACA program, who the UW system treats as out of state, even though they may have gone to middle school and high school in Sheboygan. And speaking of the DACA program, just a little fact. There's 794,000 for ease of math. Let's call it 800,000. They have to renew their status every 2 years, and they have to pay $485 with that application and go through an FBI background check every 2 years. If they've been convicted of any crime, they're disallowed from the program. So we're not talking about criminals. We're talking about people who can pass an FBI background check. I know I get nervous when they say, we're going to have to do an FBI background check. I'm like, ugh. Some stuff you may not want to know. But talking about the money, $485 every 2 years from 800,000 people works out to $200 million every year. of income that we say, no, we don't want that. Those people cost our system too much. Some will say, go back, stand in line with the rest of them. Right now, the U.S. Customs and Immigration System is processing visa applications from December of 1999. So what does that look like for a person who came here at the age of 4 from war-torn Guatemala, has no more living relatives there, and you say, go back and stand in line? They're looking at a 18 to 20-year wait in a country that they have no peeps in. What are they going to do? Some of them don't even speak Spanish. It's okay. You're a young U.S.-born child of foreign-born immigrants, right? Let's say you're 12 years old. And your breadwinning parent is taken by the U.S. government. Your family income just dipped below the poverty level. You may go on social assistance, Women and Infant Children Program, the Supplemental Nutrition SNAP, whatever the AP stands for, or food stamps as was formerly known, free and reduced lunches. You could even end up in the foster care system. And there are people who end up in the foster care system because their parents are taken, or their current parents and guardians. All of that costing our tax dollars, right? We're paying into the system rather than having a primary caregiver make money and pay taxes and take care of his and her family. We're breaking up that nuclear family. But I think the point we more often miss is who that 12-year-old grows up to be. This is a U.S. citizen, right? What kind of student, what kind of classmate does that person become? How will they behave? How will they vote once they reach the age? Don't answer that yet. We know from school enrollment numbers at the Sheboygan Area School District that about 25% of the families in the district are Latinx families. Some of them are U.S. citizens, some of them are legal permanent residents, some of them have a different status. And we also know from the same enrollment numbers that we're very nearly a majority minority community. And by very nearly, I mean in the next 4 to 5 years, there's going to be more than 50% of our population is going to be a minority or mixed race person. As the Reverend Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I would argue that, given our current demographics, we're quickly approaching the terminal end of that arc. So what would we as a society be doing what should we as a society be doing with that 12-year-old? That child is a foreign-born, is a child of our foreign-born neighbors. And what are that person and 5 of 10 peers that will sympathize with that person do when they reach the age of majority? Can we honestly afford to do nothing, to just let sit this one out? There's an interesting example in Ohio. Governor Kasich, you guys remember him from the presidential, we just had a presidential thing, didn't we? Well, he ran as a candidate for the Republican Party, and right now he's still the governor of Ohio. Over the summer, he launched a New Americans campaign where he funded offices throughout his state to attract, not to attract the immigrants without status, but rather the legal permanent residents and new Americans. That's why it's called the New Americans program, the newly sworn in U.S. citizens, to work in the state of Ohio. But he did this knowing that those people have families who don't enjoy the privilege of that legal status. So he's busy building welcoming communities for those extended families so that his attraction effort isn't limited to just $6 million in the L in Chicago. So I ask again, can Sheboygan really, really afford to just sit on the sidelines and see how this shakes out? Where you have states like Ohio, states like California, that are intentionally attracting people that we need in Sheboygan County. You guys know that Sheboygan County's unemployment rate is right now at 2.7%. And you guys who are taking economics know that 4% is the point at which inflation becomes a real risk, right? And that'll have negative consequences on the community as a whole. So we are below a threshold that is considered healthy unemployment. Now, all this is really good news for you guys because you'll find work relatively quickly when you graduate, if you graduate. But we need more people in Sheboygan County. So this is where I get to say inappropriate things and make you guys feel uncomfortable. A lot of people say our system is broken. And my position is it isn't broken. It's giving us the results it was designed to give. It's a system that's built to concentrate power and wealth, usually by exploiting the environment and the people. It's not us, it's them. We're not exploiting us, we're exploiting them. It's a system of oppression and marginalization. So let's talk about that. One of the big reasons we're experiencing a change in attitudes about immigration, because 100 years ago, when my French, Irish, and German ancestors came over, it was like, nice, you're coming to this country, the American dream, right? But one of the reasons there's a change in attitude is the shifting color of skin of the immigrants. Immigration today, if you look at a lot of the arguments happening in the media, is framed in terms of brown and black people are coming over here from blank, blank countries, or people with different religious and belief systems that are here to undermine our good, solid belief system. So I want to talk a little bit about racism and how it connects to our current system. The one I assert isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do. Everybody follow me so far? Who's fallen asleep? Stand up so that everybody can look at you. Okay. That's what they used to do to us in class. Oh, you're falling asleep? Stand up. Ooh. It's hard to fall asleep standing up. I find that discussions about racism that don't focus on a system of widespread oppression and marginalization inadequately frame racist activities as individual choices. They allow the willing and unwilling agents of racism to reduce racism to simple individual acts of violence, large and small, like lynchings and slurs. This reduction allows or gives permission to the beneficiaries of the oppressive system off the hook for their privilege and complicity. It allows them to say, well, I don't participate in lynchings. I don't say slurs. It hands them the easy argument of being able to say, I don't see color, and all lives matter, and insulates them from the effects of their privilege. And it blinds them to the plight of the others. This simplification also gives room for the moral licensing and tokenism that we see, where privileged and less affected victims of the system can point at an African-American U.S. president and say, see, if you work hard enough, regardless of color, you can do anything you want. So this ties in real closely with the myth of the American dream on bootstrapping. That says, if you work really hard and put your nose to the grindstone, you can have a piece of the pie. But it allows these bootstrappers to become complicit in this system of oppression. It's a feature of the system of oppression that keeps the victims fighting for scraps, that frames their struggle in the, if they didn't have the resources you're looking for, you would be better off, and totally glosses over the fact that I have all the resources that you need to prosper, but go get theirs. And this particular feature of the wider system of oppression prevents allies and different oppressed groups from forming united movements to systemically face down the system. We are encouraged to reject intersectionality and to see the symptoms as separate problems. Misogyny is not related to racism. No, those are totally different things. Misogyny, queerphobia, ableism, classism are a manifestation of the same system of oppression. Thus, please, when you hear somebody say racism or sexism or classism or colorism or any number of isms, hear all of them, because they're all part of a same system. Thus, the argument that the remedy to any kind of oppression can be boiled down to individual self-aware acts of kindness and neighborliness isn't going to cut it. I'm really nice to those people. I'm not a racist, sexist, misogynist, whatever. And that leads me to what we can do about it. This is the part that I really wanted to get to. Any questions so far? Nope. You guys are just agreeing with everything I'm saying or falling asleep?
I've always wondered what you mean by the term Latinx.
Okay. Just like I introduced myself with my pronouns he, him, his, when we say Latinx, we're making space for the people who don't believe in a binary gender system.
Yes, so Latino or Latina.
Mm-hmm. So Latinx is more encompassing. Bigger tent. Any questions? Any other questions? Okay. Okay. So for those of us who have taken Morpheus's famous red pill, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, good. I like the words of Reverend Martin Luther King. Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. But for those of you who may have been swayed by the story about the t-shirts, you guys remember that, it's been a while, okay. And who are no longer dazed or blinded by the not all white people, not all men, not all anything, haze of denial, Elie Wiesel said, and Elie was a Holocaust survivor, a Romanian Board Nobel laureate, and a U.S. citizen. We must take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Sometimes we must interfere. So here's what I'd like to ask you guys to do. Be quiet. Make space for those people who are activists. There's a whole bunch of people who are telling us every day what they need, how they can use our help. But if we're taking up the space, we can't hear them. Don't re-victimize us. A feature of a system of oppression is the fact that the oppressed are worn out. We're depressed. We express anger, rage even. We may even hurt your feelings. We're inconsistent. We do stuff that's against our own interest. Yes, that is true. We don't vote. In the quiet, though, we can learn to be mindful. I recommend you look into secular Buddhism if you're interested in the mindfulness part. Number 2, so the first is be quiet. Number 2 is listen. The struggle is legion. We've been at this for a long time. We don't need your advice. We need your allyship, your complicity, perhaps. Don't explain it to us. We don't need somebody to white-splain or mansplain something. Our lived experiences are our lived experiences. We understand why they are. Believe the women, especially women of color. Follow and listen to the black women activists. See, hear, and accept what the Native and queer communities are asking for. Look up what MMIW is. Understand why there's this thing about pronouns. Do some of the learning that our systems of education have purposefully glossed over. Read about things like the 3/5 of a person, the $5 Indian, 20 acres and a mule. Who knows what I'm talking about? All right, there's some people that are approaching woke. Watch movies like Dolores, about our Latina civil rights icon, Dolores Huerta, or Ava DuVernay's 13th, about the 13th Amendment, and how criminalization is intentionally used as a tool in the system of oppression. If you do some of this work and then have questions, ask those questions. But if you don't want to put the reps in, just send me your money. I'll take it. Read. There's a phenomenal amount of stuff that's really well put together, really well researched, really well founded in truth, in fact, in verifiable fact, in incontrovertible truth. If you don't know what to read, ask any one of your favorite activists. We have lists and lists of stuff that we rave over. We love pointing you in the direction of resources that allow you to do some of the work. Look, I'm almost done, last page. Keep in mind that the term politically correct is a crutch for I really don't care to understand. It's saying things like the word midget is not very PC, but I don't care to learn why people with dwarfism find it offensive. Stay away from, stay vigilant about how you erase others' existence out of habit, most of the time unconsciously. Don't be dismissive of our issues. That's erasure. Don't colonize their movement. The Me Too hashtag is about fighting misogyny, rape culture, and the toxic masculinity that leads to it. It isn't available for your cause. Find your own hashtag. And 3, so number 1 is be quiet, number 2, listen, number 3 is align. We absolutely need those 4 white t-shirts to join us against the bullies. The listen part is a lot of work. I get it. There's a bunch of us that deal with systemic institutionalized oppression, and that's a lot of work too. I imagine that many of you bear the burden of our current system. I've found activists in and outside of my lanes, and I'll talk about lanes in a second, that I've come to trust. So when I have a question about some issue, I look to what they're saying. They've done the work. I've done the work on them, so what they say is true. So when black women drop their thumb on Bernie, I don't need to become an expert on why Bernie isn't my guy. I trust the women. Stay in your lane. Does each community have its own issues? Yes, absolutely. The Latinx community is rife with strife. We have our own misogynists, classists, religious extremists. I know. You got them. We're on it. That's my job. Don't come at me because a Latino pastor said some outrageous things. He's mine. I'm coming for him. But you know what? Do come collect your cousin who's flying the Confederate flag. Do I need to get into why that symbol is? Okay. It belongs in the history books. I'm not arguing that we should forget about it. But your racist uncle, your sexist cousin, yeah, come get him. We need the help. Buy local, buy organic, buy fair trade. Let your wallets exercise some of the power it has. If a few nickels don't make a difference to you, find the people that they do make a difference for. So, be quiet, listen, align. Specifically in Sheboygan County, I want to get to some really, really specific points. In the next year or so, you'll start to hear throughout Wisconsin movements around restoring the driver's license. I hope I've given you enough to understand now why driver's licenses are important for the immigrant community. We'd like to keep ICE out of our local law enforcement. They don't make our communities better. They don't make our communities stronger. They drive 20% of Sheboygan County to fear. Ask the sheriff and the DA, and if you need their names and numbers, I got them, to decriminalize offenses that don't affect the safety and security of our community. Driving without a driver's license isn't a criminal act. It's an act of necessity. Register yourself and others to vote. Vote for people who center human beings in their policy. The results of an election may not affect your life in any concrete way. But trust me, as an activist, when I say that the way you vote has a life and death consequence for some people. Finally, help us modify the procedure for law enforcement calling on our kids in schools or trolling for their parents in school parking lots. 6 things that I ask for help with that you don't have to do a whole lot about. Just say, yeah, that guy. Yeah, I heard about that. That's good. Do you guys have any questions? Sir?
You reference many times in that the oppressor.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the oppressor that you are referring to?
You want me to name names? And
No, you can if you want. But.
The oppressor is, like any group, a generalization for those people who are fighting to maintain the status quo. If we can agree that the system right now leads to winners and losers, the people that are fighting to keep the system intact are the winners. And by definition, they are oppressing the losers. They are keeping the losers down.
And who are the winners and losers?
Look at who's got the money. Look at who's got the power. Look at who's got the privilege. By and large, if you want to press me that far, it's white, evangelical, Christian men above the age of 40.
Yep, that'd be me. Okay.
Let's go back to the not all.
Okay. Yep.
I'm not saying you.
No.
I'm describing a group of the 6 white t-shirt bullies.
Yep. Okay.
Now, are you part of the 6 white t-shirt bullies or part of the 4 white t-shirt allies?
That's a very good question on how you frame that.
Yes.
Okay. I am not against any population. For instance, let's say we are hopefully a country of laws. All right? So, at some point in time, if we have undocumented people from any country, I don't care. And let's reverse that, because you were talking about color or brown skin. Let's say our border on the north, our neighbors to the north, were flooding into our country, so that we have more white people coming in. Does that change the dynamic of the argument?
You're asking me to formulate an opinion over nested suppositions that are unlikely. The Canadians aren't going to, I mean, the situation where the Canadians would flood into the U.S. is, though.
I'm just saying hypothetically, I'm not saying.
Right, but those are nested hypotheticals, right? We've got, you're asking me to speculate hypothetically about a situation that is highly unlikely for the purpose of making a point. And I don't know how to respond to that because it's so unlikely.
I would say think of the Irish. Right?
Right.
At a certain point, they were the oppressed, or the Chinese. Right?
I'm sorry, I'm not following.
They were illegal, undocumented immigrants for a while, and they were brought to work under other powers. So it's not necessarily only the color of their skin.
Yeah, I understand. Go ahead.
Well, what I thought of when you were talking, and I mean, at what point, so if someone, once upon a time, the Irish came over.
Sure.
My family, my grandparents, Greek and Italian, they came over. Nobody ever said, before they got their citizenship, nobody ever said, you're undocumented, you're illegal. We don't want you here. It was a different time. And
Well, let me answer to that.
yeah,
There was no other choice. You came through Ellis Island,
right.
and then you were documented, and then you were checked for diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And if something happened, you were quarantined until you were.
Some people were sent back.
And some people were sent back, absolutely. And then as they came in, all I'm saying is, at some point in time, we have to have immigration laws that allow us to bring people in, but be able to assimilate them at the same time. We just can't let people keep coming into the country.
You know what? I think we can agree that we need immigration reform.
Every country
Yes.
has immigration laws, strict immigration laws, I might add, most of the countries.
No. The immigration laws between Canada and the U.S. are really lax.
That was an agreement over time.
But it's still a really lax immigration system.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And Europe, the 23 European countries,
Yep.
they're really lax. The 5 countries in Mercosur are really lax. The 4 countries in the Andean Pact, 5 countries in the Andean Pact, are really lax.
As lax as they are here.
Much more lax. I mean, they're similar to Canada and the U.S. So a citizen of Bolivia can go work in Argentina or Brazil or Chile. Now, Bolivia is in both Mercosur and the Andean Pact, so the Bolivian citizenry can go anywhere in South America.
Okay.
Likewise, the Central American Trade Agreement, I forget, it's got a different name, but allows for the migration of labor throughout the isthmus. The isthmus? My geography is failing me. So, yeah, I think your assertion that we have a lax system is not founded in fact.
I beg your pardon? Really?
Yeah,
Okay. I strongly disagree.
that's fine.
I have an example of that. My cousin, well, technically my mom's cousin, married someone from Germany, and they're both dual citizens of Germany and the United States. And it was a lot, they live in Germany now. They did live here for a while, and it was much easier for him to get a citizenship in Germany than it was for her to get a citizenship here.
Yes.
It's just an example.
Well, also, I mean, one thing I learned about recently are there are quite a lot of people in Wisconsin who work in the dairy industry, and they've been here 2 decades, and they work. I mean, they pay taxes, and you said there's cases for getting your citizenship that go back to 19-whatever.
1995.
And it's like, how long do you have to work and show that you're a contributing citizen. My grandpa worked and he contributed and then he got his citizenship. And why have we, where along the way did the laws, I don't understand what our immigration laws are, because to what makes logical sense to me, like, yeah, you've been working, you've been paying taxes, you're a citizen, here's your papers, come on, you're here, we need you.
Wait. Rather than making this a
Yeah, and I'm just.
binary thing,
Yeah.
I'd like to take a comment from the back. You raised your hand.
I was just gonna add in, like, I understand where you're coming from, where you want, like, there to be understanding of who's coming in, make sure that everything's checked out and everything. But like you stated, the system's 20 years behind.
Right.
That's not acceptable, and until we can get a system that's up to date, or able to process real-time applications, and I feel like arguing that we need to have a strict system, more strict system, is kind of like not moral, because you're making these people wait 20 years for something that it probably get accepted if there's enough time. So,
And that's
Over
a
here.
different discussion, I think, because you're right.
No, but it isn't different. It's connected. You can't artificially delink the features of the system.
I'm not delinking them. They are linked together. But at some point in time, because I'll go back to, okay, do we just open borders?
Nobody's arguing for that.
Right, it's not.
That's not what anybody proposes. What we're proposing is a sensible immigration reform
Yep.
that works
Yep.
in a reasonable amount of time, tells people they can stay or not, based on a fixed set of criteria that eliminates capriciousness.
Okay. And how would we do that if we don't have some sort of control over our borders?
We have extreme control over our borders already.
Down south?
Yeah,
I mean, they took all those people and put them in a prison.
they can hold 2,500 children.
Yeah. And how many more are coming in?
Nobody's coming in.
Nobody is?
Answer the question, how many are
How many are what?
coming in? You said floods are coming in.
I don't know what the numbers are, but we have human
Do you know
trafficking.
if it's
We
more
have
than
human
1,000?
Oh, that's different. Human trafficking is when somebody unwillingly gets taken to someplace they don't want to go.
Like the Africans being trafficked to the
That's trafficking. When they pick up my daughter and say, here, you're going to go work in this hotel over there.
Right.
That's trafficking.
Okay, so coming over in truckloads, and I'm not sure if they're unwilling or willing, they probably want to get to this country, which is fine, but we have people dying in backs of trucks or in cargo.
That's how desperate they are.
No, and I understand that they're desperate, that they want to.
And so our answer is, go to the door over there, knock on it, and see if they'll open, knowing full well they're going to open it in 20 years. And in the meantime, you deal with a situation that's totally untenable, which includes death and dismemberment.
Death and dismemberment
from U.S.-funded troops in Mexico. Go ahead.
Well, this is related, I think it's definitely related, and it's very much on my mind, is when you mentioned the desperate situation that these people are in. The degree to which the United States is responsible for humanitarian crises all over this continent and in other parts of the world, causing situations, and very intentionally, that put the whole economies are strangled. They're put under so much duress. People lose their jobs. They can't make any money in these countries. The factories are horrible. But the wars and the subversion, overthrowing dictators, overthrowing democratically elected presidents quite often in Latin America, and then helping to install dictators in their place who conduct massive crimes against humanity, and put these people in a state where they have to flee. People don't want to leave their own countries that they're born in normally. Not normally.
And you're saying that's all our fault,
I didn't say it's all our fault,
okay?
but I said we definitely, intentionally created humanitarian crises in country after country for more than 100 years. I mean, you could go back further than that if you want. But the United States government, both sides, I'm not talking partisan here, Democrat, Republican, see Latin America essentially as their backyard to be exploited, to be controlled, and have done this for so long. Consequently, these people are fleeing. So the humanitarian issue here is huge. It's not people who are, as have been characterized, they're sending their rapists, they're sending all the bad people are coming. It's just people. It's just people who can't eat.
Or who are
who can't
threatened.
live, who
I mean,
have no future,
literally.
who are threatened because of the level of crime now in their countries. The crime in their countries isn't all from drug lords. In many countries, the drug lords are fused with the police and with the government. It's narco states. Narco states. And who's buying the drugs, by the way?
We are,
We are.
absolutely.
Right. So we're creating these massive problems all over the world and then saying, oh, but we don't want you to come over here. You know, I mean, to me,
But I think there's a difference in wanting them to come over, but being able to have a control on who's coming over and how they're coming over.
Well, it's certainly not a matter of either or. We have no control or we have total control. You know?
Right.
We have a big block. So I think the gentleman is saying that yes, you have to have control. We have immigration policies, but they have to be humane. And these ICE people are not humane. They're terrorists. They're scaring the hell out of people.
I'm sorry, the ICE?
ICE.
Okay, well, I don't agree with that at all. I mean, they are a law enforcement agency trying to uphold the law that's in place currently. And again, we can have a discussion about changing that.
Well, they were created. So, I mean, laws are created and laws are changed. If laws are inhumane, hopefully somebody tries to change them. And that's what's being discussed.
So what I see a lot of people comparing, and I'll leave this to you guys if you want to look it up. A lot of what ICE is doing as an agency, and it's the individuals that are part of that agency, look a lot like what the marshals that came about from the 1850 Escaped Slave Act, which was law. It wasn't a particularly moral law, but it was law. And the agents that were enforcing that law were behaving lawfully, albeit immorally.
So were the Gestapo, so were so many.
So we can't stand behind a shield that says, but that's the law. Because as Martin Luther King said, the oppressor will never give freedom to the oppressed on his own. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. It must be demanded. And to demand it, it requires breaking the law. Go ahead.
I would like to bring up the problem with your argument about oppression. So you bring up this point that, say, a team who's losing should get a boost, to everyone should be equal, but yet you say that everyone should be divided, to pick a side. Well, picking sides, does that not encourage oppression, where there will be a right and a wrong party?
All right, I don't see the logical connection between fair play and picking sides, right? There's a concept of equity, equality, and justice. They're not the same thing, all right? So in a kid's game, when the ringers start beating up on the scrubs, the scrubs get to add more kids to their team to kind of even the playing field, right? That's just fair play. That's so that it doesn't become this really horrible experience and you have a whole wide defections, right? You're breaking the rules, right? That say it's 7 on a side, and you're making it, well, first you take a guy off of this side, or kid, and it's 6 on 7. And then if they keep beating on the 7, then it becomes 8 and 9, right? And then if they keep beating on the 9, they take the goalpost and they bring them closer together, right? I don't think any of those 6 are going to say, well, that's unfair. You're whooping this other team, right? You've demonstrated your superiority. We're just making it fun at this point. You're making it humane, right? Because it isn't, let's just wipe them off the face of soccer, right? It's, let's work on our skills, let's learn to love the game, let's acquire the culture of fair play, because that's humane, right? So when the coaches and parents intervene and say, okay, you guys have to take a kid off the field and this team gets to put 3 more players on the field and they get to reduce their goal, I don't see where that's picking sides. I see that as the organization, which can be analogous to a society, looking at a situation that is clearly defined winners and losers, making a better experience for all of them, without saying us, them. That's where I understood your argument.
I guess the bringing in the analogy of the sports team, I guess, wasn't necessarily correct. But then you bring up, so taking sides, usually when there are 2 sides on a subject, I guess you could say that there would be, say, a right and wrong. Say an argument, say over facts, there would be a right fact and a wrong fact.
And then there's statistics.
I'm not sure.
Okay. And so just to take it to the extreme, locking children up in cages is not a sides thing, right? When I fall on the side of let those kids out of the cages, I'm not asking for anybody else's plate. I'm not taking somebody's cage away. I'm saying, let's center our analysis, our policy, the outcome on the experience of that individual. That individual's life sucks. And the U.S., the greatest, most wonderful country in the world, can't come up with a better outcome for 2,500 children? Is that what you're saying? And again, I go back to the sides thing. I'm not trying to argue whether this policy is this or that. I'm saying, is there a good side and the other side to locking up kids? Right? I don't see it. Right? I don't see where there's an argument where.
The answer, I'm sorry. So what do you think the answer should be?
1, don't separate them from their parents.
Okay.
Step 1.
All right. But can we agree that we have to make sure that they are family?
Why?
Do you think that maybe somebody would try to get into this country using children as a pawn? Would you buy that
Okay.
at all?
So, how many of you have taken statistics? Flashbacks. Type 1 and type 2 errors. Right? I've run out of the academic piece, but the upshot of it is, do I create a system that, in order to avoid any 1s, sacrifices some 2s? Or is the system going to avoid 1s or sacrifice 1s for 2s? And this theory is about hypotheses, right? I'll let you look it up, but this is my go-to graph So you guys had a little statistics. And I use it to say, are we going to oppress 2,500 children, scar them for life, to avoid how many people are going to try to cheat? We don't know. But these are people who are willing to wear ankle bracelets demonstrably. So you say, okay, you're applying for asylum because conditions in El Salvador really suck. You have family in Chicago? Okay. Once a week you have to show up and check in with USCIS. Here's your ankle monitor. While we go through the process. Right? And if during the process we notice you stole that kid, jail. We notice, oh, it's not really your kid, it's your cousin, but the parents agree, I think that's okay. As long as the good of the child and the consent of the parents is included, we can do it.
No, and I think you just answered that. If we find somebody that is not doing it, it's not their child.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying that they're kidnapping them. I'm just saying, and we find that that's the case, right? And then we take appropriate action, right?
Sure.
Okay. That's all I was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, and you're right. We need to leave the parents and the children together.
Mm-hmm.
We have to figure that, and that's part of.
So my conclusion to this is the Venn diagram between how you'd like to see this fixed and how I like to see it fixed is probably 80–90% overlap. Can we work on that part, right? Just so that some of this human misery is alleviated as quickly as possible. I think there's a set of politically difficult decisions for all sides that need to be made so that the humans involved in the system lead better lives. Right? And I think that's perfectly achievable as soon as we start centering the humans and stop advocating for a system for the system's sake. Any other questions? It's 8:15, so I know you guys have this really moving social life on Tuesday night. It's happening.
Can I say one other thing?
Yeah, go ahead,
The
Lisa.
question that you asked about picking a side, like what I heard you say, what I heard Marco say was, the thing about the 4 white T's, it's kind of like, it's easy to not recognize privilege exactly, like it's kind of like, well, my life's okay, and I'm all right, and I mean, I think the picking of the side aspect is more about seeing an injustice and maybe learning about it, like learning what is really going on here. How do I want to help? Because I am in a privileged position, you know, and people are suffering, and I think I should look at this. So when I heard taking a side, I heard like not just sitting back in neutrality and ignoring, but like learning.
Picking the human side.
Picking the human side. Thank you. Yeah.
So I'd like to leave you guys with one last thought.
You have the last question.
Oh, last question.
I'd also like to think where you bring up that, say, people without a driver's license, that not having a driver's license shouldn't be a crime. I think it definitely shouldn't be a crime.
I agree.
It's if you make that you don't require a driver's license to drive, you can sue anarchy.
Yeah, but I'm not arguing that they shouldn't have a driver's license. But you can't make it a crime and then not let them have it.
So what I think here with the argument would be is laws that are in place now, they're meant to be upheld until change.
Like the 1850 escaped slave law.
I'm not aware of what that is.
That's the thing. There are all kinds of laws that we now recognize as immoral and have struck down. Sheboygan was a sunset town where people of color found here after sundown were jailed.
into, like, up to 1959.
According to what I heard, the laws.
Yeah, I haven't verified that, so I'm not willing to say that, but, okay?
Yeah.
Can we agree that that law is wrong in any universe? And that enforcing that law isn't a law and order thing?
Well, so, but then, now you're kind of saying that driving with a license, without a license is one of those things where,
No, no. I'm not advocating for saying you can drive without a license. No, yes. As a driver who has family on the road, I want other licensed people, because the license process means you know the rules of the road, you've been through a vision check, and somebody's looking in at you every 10 years, right? So that when you lose your sight or cognition or a limb or start wearing glasses, the government says, you have to wear glasses, dude, when you drive, right? I want that to happen. That's a good outcome. That's where government needs to intervene. Yes, absolutely. But what I'm saying is, you can't say, I'm going to criminalize you for not having a license, and then I'm going to say, but you can't have a license. What is that? As a society, you're saying, you're just a criminal.
Undocumented people can't get a license. They can't go get a license. So they can't be, so they can't
Yeah.
get any better, and that's completely unfair. Because
I mean, it is fair because they came into the system illegally. That in itself.
What? Okay. We can
It's
argue.
kind of like how marijuana was criminalized in Colorado. People who
Decriminalized.
were jailed because they possessed marijuana, they stayed in jail. There was a break period where they could say be retried for their crime, but those people who did the crime still did the crime while it was illegal. So coming into the country currently is illegal.
It isn't illegal. And they didn't come in the country breaking the law. Most of them come in on a tourist visa and overstay.
Yes, overstaying.
And that's not a criminal offense. It's civil disobedience, like jaywalking.
They went.
It's a misdemeanor. So what you're saying is they should lose life and limb. Wait, what?
No, there's.
Oh, okay, cool. Sorry, that means some nasty things in some places. So for a misdemeanor, we are jailing people. That is literally like jailing jaywalkers.
I mean, if you break the law, there are consequences for the crime.
I agree. But you can't create a system where I can't comply.
Well, that's, I feel like what this discussion is about is getting the system changed. It should be less about, because, I mean, if, obviously the system needs to be changed where these people can come into the country legally and it needs to be more efficient. I feel like we shouldn't be encouraging these people that are here illegally right now because they skipped the system.
They didn't skip the system, man.
There should be an option that they could apply because now this situation has become more prevalent. But I feel
It hasn't become more prevalent.
Who broke the law shouldn't be encouraged.
They didn't break the law.
How come nobody is ever talking about holding the employers accountable, those people who need that labor and sometimes break the law to get these people to work, and they're not following, they're not even giving benefits or decent wages, and bathrooms,
So-
and they're never held accountable.
The law says that it's illegal to employ people who don't have the right to work in this country. So there's two lawbreakers there. And you're right, Nanette. We're focusing our discussion on the team that has no resources. Because the team that has the resources, and that's what I mean by oppressor, says, don't look over here, Mr. Policeman, Mr. Law Enforcement Agency. This is not who you want to come after. It's all of them.
I totally agree that needs to also be taken care of. But as you mentioned with visas, with people coming in and overstaying their visas, which technically isn't breaking the law, but aren't you encouraging people to come in and not renew their visas?
I'm not encouraging anybody to do anything.
I understand, but I think we all know
The way
that's a good way of doing it.
the even more forceful way of doing it is denying them viable path, right? So there's people here who are stuck here because they don't have any documents from their home country.
And you're right, we have to do something about the people that are already here. We have to come up with a path.
Estimated 11 million people.
Yes, absolutely. And you can't send them all back, right?
There aren't enough buses and planes.
Absolutely.
I mean, just from the logistics.
You're right, we have to do that, but at some point, we have to stop the flow.
And that's what I mean. I think we can agree, as sensible people, without all the partisan bickering back and forth, that there is, like, we can see through the trees and, okay, that's where we need to go.
We got to get over that.
I think we can do that. Yes. And I think activists like me
Yep.
are willing to do that, are willing to sit down and say, yes, yes, no, okay, yep, we can work our way towards a common ground. Absolutely.
Good.
Anybody else?
Just one thing on this point of law, I'm just tossing it out. Who writes these laws? Who passes these laws? What are the laws written for? Who are they trying to control? Who are benefiting by the laws? It's something to bear in mind when you're talking about laws. If it's, you stay in this lane and that lane when you're driving, it benefits everybody. But the kinds of laws that are being talked about here are laws that are written by oligarchs, basically, rich people. They're written by corporations, they're written by lawyers. They're very sophisticated pieces of documents, and they're written to cause problems like the one we're talking about, so that these people can't come in or so they can't stay, to discourage them, to keep them in a situation where their lives are tenuous or they could be criminalized, etc. So law is not like God. It's not like ethics. It's not like ethical. It's a thing. It's a construct that.
It's a human thing.
It's a human thing, and as you've said many times, frequently they have to be changed because they turn out to be atrocious at times.
One of my favorite cognitive scientists, Steven Pinker, just came out with a book called Enlightenment Now, where one of his central arguments is we need to recognize the fallibility of our institutions, and we need to allow civil discourse to find, highlight, and change those fallible points in our institutions. And laws and legislating is one of those institutions that is fallible. And I think all of us can agree that there's more problems than we can fix in one night. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your attention and for engaging.